Hello, my name is Fletcher Crossman. I'm based here in Los Angeles, and thank you so much for making the time to listen to this pitch. And you can probably guess that this is about superheroes and Marvel comics and so on, which it is. But just to be clear, I didn't grow up one of those kids reading Marvel comics all the time. I think like most people, I discovered them through the movies over the last few years. And so now we all know the origin story of Iron Man or the origin story of Captain America. But maybe it's time we heard the origin story of the man behind those heroes. So in the musical With Great Power, we meet a young Stan Lee. And this was at a time in the late 1960s when America had a terrible epidemic of heroin on its streets. And so Stan and his young team decide they're going to create a new type of comic that's kind of gritty, that takes kids right down into the streets of New York, as it really was, as a warning about the dangers of heroin. But this brings Stan up against the hyper-traditional Judge Murphy of the Comics Code Authority. And Judge Murphy makes it quite clear to Stan he's not going to approve any comic that talks about heroin, however well-intentioned. Now, some other companies had challenged the Comics Code Authority in the past, and all of them had failed and gone out of business. And Stan, with every ounce of his being, wants to cling on to the success that he's worked so hard for with Marvel. But he's also fallen in love with a young woman called Joan. And Joan's got personal experience of what heroin can do to a person. So when Stan backs down in the face of the CCA saying you can't do this, Joan takes it personally. And she really lays into him and says, look, every one of your heroes comes to a point like this where they have to lay it all on the line for others. And what does it mean if you yourself won't do it? And it's too much for their relationship to take, and it breaks them apart. So this is a very defining moment for Stan Lee. And in that moment, he makes a decision that he's going to publish this comic even without approval. Now, this had never been done before in the history of comics. And so he was going right out on a limb, and it brings him to a titanic battle against Judge Murphy. And it's in that battle that he not only starts to believe in this cause, but he also starts to believe in the power of his own voice and that power to do good. And it's this moment that brings him and Joan back together. It's this moment that raises the level of storytelling at Marvel Comics. And it's that moment that when we look back, we can see it was going to change American culture. So these are real events, and these are real people. So we've taken some legal advice, including from the Dramatists Guild, and they've made it clear that we're on safe legal ground. So we present to you the tale of one of America's most beloved storytellers. But it's more than that, it's a love story. And it's peppered with songs that harken back to the golden days of rock music in the late 60s, early 70s, with those catchy melodies and huge choruses. And it's also a challenge to those of us living today in another age of change and of prejudice, to look at the life of a man who became a hero, not because he was armed with superpowers, but because he was armed with a pen and the belief that with great power comes great responsibility. Thank you.